The patrol car's red and blue lights sliced through the dusk, painting the cracked asphalt in pulses of accusation. Aisha Carter gripped the steering wheel, her heart pounding like a war drum, as the siren's wail pinned her to the moment. She wasn't just a driver pulled over on a quiet Oakland street. She was a black woman, alone, and the weight of that truth bore down harder than the officer's stares. The evening had started with hope. Aisha, 38, had driven into the city with a quiet pride, her new police chief badge tucked in her glove compartment, her first day on the job awaiting her tomorrow. She'd spent years climbing the ranks, first as a beat cop, then detective, now the youngest police chief in Oakland's history. Her appointment had made headlines, not all of them kind. Social media buzzed with venom, ex-posts calling her a diversity hire, or worse, questioning her right to lead. But Aisha had learned to drown out the noise. She'd faced skepticism before on the force, in her neighborhood, even in her own family. Her father, a retired mechanic, had warned her, "They'll never let you forget who you are." She'd smiled then, defiant, but now, as two officers approached her car, his words echoed like a prophecy. "License and registration," Officer Mark Reynolds barked, his flashlight blinding her. His partner, Officer Tom Callahan, stood a few steps back, hand resting on his holster, eyes scanning her like she was a suspect in a lineup. Aisha's breath caught, but she kept her movements slow, deliberate. She'd been here before, not just as a civilian, but as a cop who knew the drill. The air crackled with tension, the kind that came when assumptions collided with reality. "I'm reaching for my wallet," Aisha said, her voice steady but laced with an edge she couldn't hide. She handed over her license, her fingers brushing the badge she hadn't yet revealed. Reynolds snatched the ID, his lips curling as he read her name. "Aisha Carter." "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Her pulse quickened. "Why?" she asked, keeping her tone calm but firm. She knew the law knew they had no grounds for this. The stop had been routine, they'd said, something about a broken taillight. But Aisha's car was pristine, checked just yesterday. This wasn't about a taillight. It was about her. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. "Just do it. Now." Callahan shifted, his stance widening, as if bracing for trouble. Aisha's mind raced. She could comply, de-escalate, and walk away, or she could push back, demand respect. But respect wasn't guaranteed. Not here, not for her. Not yet. She stepped out, her tailored blazer catching the faint glow of the street lamp. At 5 feet 9 inches, she stood taller than Reynolds, her presence commanding despite the knot in her stomach. The officers exchanged a glance, and Callahan spoke up, his voice low but sharp. "You got any weapons on you?" Aisha's jaw tightened.
"No."
"I'm a police officer." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Reynolds snorted, a sound that grated against her nerves. "Sure you are. Hands where we can see 'em." The street was quiet, but Aisha felt the eyes of the city on her neighbors peeking through curtains, a teenager filming from across the road. She raised her hands slowly, her dignity a shield against their disbelief. "Check my badge," she said, nodding toward the car. "Glove compartment." Callahan hesitated, then moved to the car, his boots scuffing the pavement. Reynolds kept his gaze locked on Aisha, his expression a mix of suspicion and something uglier, resentment. She'd seen that look before, in precinct hallways, in community meetings. It was the look of someone who thought she didn't belong. Callahan returned, holding her badge. His face paled as he read it. "Chief Aisha Carter," he muttered almost to himself. Reynolds' head snapped toward him. "What?" "She's the new chief," Callahan said, his voice barely above a whisper. The air shifted, like the moment before a storm breaks. Reynolds' flashlight wavered, then dropped slightly, his bravado crumbling. Aisha lowered her hands, her eyes never leaving his. "Now," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Tell me why you stopped me." The question wasn't just about the taillight. It was about every stop, every sidelong glance, every whispered slur she'd endured her entire life. It was about the system she'd sworn to serve, the one that still saw her as less, even with a badge in her hand. Reynolds opened his mouth, but no words came. Callahan shuffled, his discomfort palpable. We thought Reynolds started, but Aisha cut him off. You thought I didn't belong here, she said, her voice low but fierce. You saw a black woman driving a nice car and assumed I was trouble. That's why I'm standing here, hands up, while you question my right to exist in this moment. The teenager across the street was still filming, his phone a silent witness. Aisha felt the weight of it all, the history, the pain, the hope she carried. She'd taken this job to change things, to bridge the gap between the police and the community she loved. But standing here, under the glare of a flashlight, she wondered if the gap was too wide, the distrust too deep. Callahan cleared his throat. Chief, we didn't know.
I'm sorry.
His apology was genuine, but it wasn't enough. Aisha shook her head. This isn't about you knowing who I am. It's about what you assumed before you knew. Reynolds shifted, his face a mask of conflicting emotions: shame, defiance, fear. We were just doing our job, he said. But the words sounded hollow, even to him. Your job? Aisha repeated, her voice steady now, is to protect and serve, not to profile, not to intimidate. If you can't do that, you don't belong under my command. The words hit like a gavel. Reynolds flinched, and Callahan looked away, the reality of her authority sinking in. Aisha took a step forward, her presence filling the space between them. Tomorrow, I start as your chief, and I promise you, things are going to change. She turned back to her car, her heart still racing but her resolve unshaken. The teenager across the street lowered his phone, giving her a small nod, a spark of hope in his eyes. Aisha slid into the driver's seat, her badge glinting in the dim light. She wasn't just a symbol, she was a force, and she'd prove it. The next morning, Aisha walked into the Oakland Police Department headquarters, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The precinct was a hive of activity officers briefing, phones ringing, the hum of a system that never slept. But as she entered, the noise faded, heads turning, whispers spreading. She felt the weight of their stares, some curious, some hostile, a few hopeful. She'd prepared for this moment her whole career, but preparation didn't dull the edge of it. In the briefing room, she faced her officers, men and women of every background, their faces a mosaic of skepticism and expectation. Reynolds and Callahan stood near the back, their expressions unreadable. Aisha took a deep breath, her voice clear and commanding as she began. I'm Aisha Carter, your new chief. Last night, 2 of your colleagues stopped me on a routine patrol. They didn't know who I was. They saw a black woman and made assumptions. That stops now. The room was silent, the weight of her words settling over them. She continued, her voice rising with conviction. We're here to serve this city, not to tear it apart. I've seen what distrust does on both sides. I've lived it, but I believe in this department. I believe in what we can do if we rebuild trust, starting with ourselves. She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room. I'm not here to be your enemy. I'm here to lead you. But leadership means accountability. If you can't serve every citizen with respect, you're in the wrong job. The officers shifted, some nodding, others staring at the floor. Aisha knew this was just the beginning. Change wasn't a speech, it was action. Day after day, against a tide of history. But she was ready. Over the next weeks, Aisha threw herself into the work. She met with community leaders, listened to their stories of pain and hope. She implemented new training programs, focusing on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. She walked the streets herself, not in a chief's uniform but in plain clothes, talking to kids, shop owners, mothers who'd lost sons to violence. She wanted them to see her not as a badge but as one of them. Reynolds and Callahan were a test case. She didn't fire them, though she could have. Instead, she paired them with community outreach programs, forcing them to face the people they'd sworn to protect. Reynolds resisted at first, his pride bruised, but Aisha saw something in him, a flicker of potential. Callahan was quicker to adapt, his apology that night on the street echoing in his actions. One evening, Aisha visited a community center in East Oakland, where a youth basketball game was underway. The gym was alive with laughter, the squeak of sneakers, the thump of the ball. She spotted Reynolds there, awkwardly coaching a group of teens. He caught her eye, gave a hesitant nod. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start. Back at the precinct, Aisha faced her own challenges. Budget cuts loomed and morale was shaky. Some officers resented her, whispering about quotas and woke agendas. Others rallied behind her, inspired by her vision. She worked late into the night, drafting policies, reviewing cases, answering emails from citizens, some praising her, others threatening her. Through it all, she carried her father's words, "They'll never let you forget who you are." She didn't want to forget. It was who she was that made her fight. One night, a call came in a protest downtown, sparked by a viral video of a police stop gone wrong. Aisha arrived on the scene, her badge gleaming under the streetlights. The crowd was angry, signs waving, voices chanting. She didn't shy away. She stepped forward, unarmed, and asked to listen. It wasn't easy. Shouts of "sellout" and "traitor" stung, but she stood her ground, hearing their pain, promising change. By the time she returned to her office, dawn was breaking. She sat at her desk, exhausted but unbroken. On her desk was a note, left by an anonymous officer. "Keep going, Chief. We're with you." Aisha smiled, her heart swelling. The road was long, but she wasn't alone. The weeks that followed were a crucible, testing Aisha Carter's resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. The protest had been a flashpoint, but it wasn't the end. Oakland simmered with tension. Decades of mistrust between the police and the community didn't vanish with a single speech or a new chief. Aisha knew this, felt it in the air every time she stepped onto the streets. Her inbox overflowed with messages, some from citizens thanking her for showing up at the protest, others from officers questioning her loyalty to the badge. On X, posts about her swung wildly. Some hailed her as a hero, others painted her as a betrayer of the force. She read them all, not to fuel her doubts but to understand the divide she was determined to bridge. Her days began before dawn and ended long after midnight. She met with city council members, pushing for funding to expand community policing programs. She sat with mothers who'd lost children to gun violence, their tears a reminder of why she'd taken this job. She held town halls, standing alone under harsh fluorescent lights, answering questions that ranged from hopeful to hostile. "How can we trust you?" one man demanded, his voice shaking with years of pain. Aisha didn't flinch. "You don't have to trust me yet," she said, "but give me a chance to earn it." At the precinct, change was slower, more jagged. Aisha introduced mandatory bias training, but some officers attended with crossed arms and skeptical frowns. She overhauled use of force policies, emphasizing de-escalation, but whispers of soft on crime followed her. Officer Reynolds, still stinging from their encounter on the street, was one of the loudest critics. She heard him in the break room one day, his voice low but clear. "She's more activist than cop." Aisha didn't confront him. She'd learned long ago that words alone didn't change hearts, actions did. Instead, she assigned Reynolds to a pilot program she'd created, pairing officers with local nonprofits to rebuild community ties. He was to work with a youth mentorship group in West Oakland, teaching kids about conflict resolution. It was a gamble. Reynolds could sabotage it or he could rise to the challenge. Aisha watched from a distance, giving him space to decide who he wanted to be. Callahan, on the other hand, surprised her. He'd started showing up early to briefings, asking questions about her vision for the department. One day, he approached her after a shift, his face earnest. "Chief, I've been thinking about that night. I messed up. I want to do better." Aisha studied him, seeing the same guilt she'd seen under the street lamp. "Then do it," she said. "Show up for the people who need you most." He nodded, and she saw a spark of determination in his eyes. It wasn't absolution, but it was progress. The city wasn't the only battleground. Aisha's personal life frayed under the weight of her role. Her husband, Marcus, a high school teacher, supported her but worried about the toll. "You're carrying the world, Aisha," he said one night as they sat on their porch, the hum of Oakland streets in the distance. "You don't have to do it alone." She squeezed his hand, grateful for his steadiness. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this fight was hers to lead. Her daughter, Maya, 14, was another anchor. Maya had seen the video of Aisha's stop on X, shared thousands of times with captions ranging from "Hero Chief" to "Cops Never Change." She'd asked Aisha, her voice small, "Why do they hate you?" Aisha had no easy answer, only a promise. "I'm doing this so you won't have to face what I did." 6 months into her tenure, the city erupted again. A young black man, Jamal Harris, was shot by an officer during a traffic stop. The details where murky body cam footage showed a struggle, but no clear weapon in Jamal's hands. The officer claimed self-defense. The community cried murder. Protests swelled, and Aisha found herself at the center of a storm. X exploded with hashtags: "Justice for Jamal," "Fire the Chief." News vans parked outside the precinct, cameras hungry for a soundbite. Aisha's phone buzzed with texts from the mayor, urging her to control the narrative. But Aisha wasn't interested in narratives. She wanted the truth. She ordered an immediate investigation, independent of the department, and released the body cam footage to the public, a move that drew gasps from her deputy chiefs. "You're throwing us under the bus," one said. Aisha's response was steel. "If we can't face the truth, we don't deserve the badge." She met with Jamal's family, sitting in their living room as his mother wept. "I can't bring him back," Aisha said, her voice breaking, "but I'll make sure this never happens again." The investigation revealed gaps in training and protocol violations by the officer, who was placed on leave pending charges. Aisha held a press conference, her face steady despite the hecklers in the crowd. "This department failed Jamal Harris," she said. "We failed his family and we failed this city. But we will learn and we will change." The crowd was divided. Some cheered, others booed, but Aisha didn't waver. She announced new reforms: stricter use of force guidelines, mandatory mental health support for officers, and a civilian oversight board with real power. It wasn't enough for everyone, but it was a start. Back at the precinct, Reynolds approached her, his face different, less guarded, more human. "I saw you at the press conference," he said. "You meant it, didn't you?" Aisha nodded. "Every word." He hesitated, then added, "I'm starting to get it, Chief. The kids at the center, they're not what I thought." Aisha saw the crack in his armor, the beginning of something new. "Keep showing up, Reynolds," she said. "That's where it starts." As winter settled over Oakland, Aisha's reforms began to take root. Arrests for minor offenses dropped, and community engagement programs grew. She walked the streets regularly, not as a chief but as Aisha, listening to stories, sharing coffee with shop owners, playing pickup basketball with kids. The teenager who'd filmed her stop that first night, Malik, became a regular at the youth center. He told her one day, "I thought you'd be like the rest, but you're different." Aisha smiled, her heart full. "I'm just trying to do right, Malik." The precinct wasn't transformed overnight. Some officers left, unwilling to adapt. Others stayed, inspired by Aisha's vision. Callahan became a mentor to new recruits, teaching them to see the community as partners, not adversaries. Reynolds, to Aisha's surprise, requested to stay with the youth program. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that was enough for now. On the anniversary of her appointment, Aisha stood at a community festival in East Oakland, watching families laugh, kids dance, officers mingle without tension. It wasn't utopia. Distrust lingered, and the scars of the past ran deep. But there was hope, fragile but real. She thought of her father's words again. "They'll never let you forget who you are." She hadn't forgotten. She'd used her identity, her pain, her strength to build something better. That evening, she drove home, the city's lights reflecting off her windshield. She thought of Jamal, of Malik, of the officers she was shaping, and the community she was fighting for. The road ahead was long, but she wasn't alone. Marcus and Maya waited at home, her anchors in the storm. The badge in her pocket felt lighter now, not because the weight was gone, but because she carried it with purpose. Aisha's story isn't just hers, it's ours. What does justice mean to you, and how do we heal a divided community?